So we are now recording. Thank you everyone for joining our presentation. The description might have tipped you off, but we're members of the Research and Equity team. I'm Katie Wilson. I'm a faculty researcher here. Paul and Brandon, I'll let you introduce yourselves.
And I am Paul Mines. I'm a researcher slash IT business technology analyst in the research office.
Hello, I'm Brandon Muranaka. I'm a math faculty slash adjunct faculty researcher slash teaching and learning lead.
It's great to have all those experiences. Go ahead, Sabrina, I saw you unmute.
Hi, everyone. Sabrina Sunsel. I'm happy member of the research team. I get to work with our researchers as the Dean of Research, Institutional Effectiveness, Research and Planning, which includes PD. And so glad you are all here to spend your afternoon time with us as we go over these data tools.
So we are here today to talk about the various data resources that we have on campus. Some of the objectives for our presentation today are to learn what data are publicly accessible to us at CRC, and to practice utilizing our two biggest tools, or two main tools and most accessed tools, the CRC HawkDash and HawkTrack. You might be familiar with those tools already. And then finally, we're going to do a brief dive into some of the other data resources that exist on campus and where to get help with those resources, or with any of your other data needs. So in summary, for those of you who are not familiar with the HawkDash and HawkTrack, or for those of you who are familiar but need a refresher definition, which is also me because I asked Paul about these definitions earlier today, our HawkDash is a dashboard that takes a look at application, matriculation, enrollment, success, and completion trends for all students at CRC. The HawkTrack is a cohort tracker, which means that we're looking at first-time students entering in fall and tracking their progress throughout their time at CRC. So the difference there is that these are first-time students only, as opposed to students at any point in their journey. Paul, do you want to add anything to that?
Nope, that's 100% accurate. Good job, Katie.
Thanks, Paul. And so now I'm going to end the slideshow part of our presentation, and we're just going to really be demoing a lot of data today. And I actually encourage you, if you have two screens, to consider playing around with the dashboards with us. Some of you are familiar with the data literacy project that Brandon and I hosted last year, and we discovered in that project that it's really, really helpful to practice in these tools. So if you do have a screen available to practice, I encourage you to follow along and ask questions as we go through these tools, and we're happy to answer. Feel free to write in the chat or simply unmute yourself and interrupt. So the link I just followed brings us to the Division of Institutional Equity Research and Planning. You can find that on the employee page, the CRC Employee Resources page, under Equity and Research. Under that, you can click either Research here, or on the left hand, the navigation bar, it brings you to the same place. And this is everything research. Under this page, I'll navigate to our data dashboards, and this contains first the HawkDash and Track, what we're looking at today, and a few other resources that Brandon will touch on later on in the presentation. Paul has also linked both of these dashboards directly in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started with the HawkDash, and then Paul will do the HawkTrack. So right now I'm looking at that HawkDash link. The homepage for this dashboard actually features a video that Brandon made that covers almost everything I'm going to cover today. So you don't need to memorize this presentation. You can always come back and refer to Brandon's talking head here in this video. The only thing that video does not yet cover is our last tab or most recent tab on program awards, but we're hoping to get that added in this help video soon. So that's the only tab today that's not quite yet in that video. So the Hawk track follows a similar format as this, where all of your different pieces of information are linked at the top of the dashboard. So I'm just going to walk through these one at a time. The first tab here is application data. And I'll spend a little bit of time working on pointing out some features on this page that will be true for subsequent pages as well. So we always have our navigation bar here at the left and our data over on the right. There are definitions always right below the graph. So if you have any questions about what's being displayed, you can always refer to this text here. So for application, we're seeing that this chart is showing us applicant counts. Students who applied exclusively for articulated credit, mouse over to view exact counts. So if I mouse over a term, I'm seeing exactly how many applicants we received in that term. You'll notice these are just fall terms here. I can add spring in if I want to, and that's true for all of the pages on this dashboard. We actually recommend not looking at fall and spring together because of how busy that is. Data can be very different in the fall and in the spring, so it makes it look a bit confusing. So we like to look at fall or spring separately. On this particular page for applicants, we can change it to the % of applicants who enroll. So this is of all of those applicants, what percentage of them proceeded to enroll in the institution. And by hovering, you can see the percentage, the numerator and the denominator there. If I was interested in EGUSD applicants only, I can do the same thing for EGUSD applicants. And then finally, a very important piece of all of these pages is our ability to disaggregate the data. We've got a large amount of different student demographic groups here on this list, and we can pick one. This then, I'm going to switch back to applicant counts. This then shows us the same data, again, trends over time, but it's displayed as a bar graph. So for each group, we're looking at application trends over time, orange being fall 2017, gray being fall 2021. And if I'm looking at the percentage of applicants who enroll, so the percentage of applicants, from that group who enroll in any given term. Sorry, I think very visually on my face. For that percentage, we can actually evaluate equity. And this is a feature that's available on many of these pages. So I'm going to kind of hover here for a bit. So when we say evaluate equity, we're using something called the percentage point gap, which is calculated usually by taking a group's enrollment percent and subtracting that enrollment percent for all applicants. So in this case, the metric we're looking at is application. Later on, we'll look at enrollment and success. So the metric will change, but we're basically saying, this sometimes helps. In fall 2017, African-American students enrolled at a rate of 34% after applying, compared to 40.3% of all applicants. So in this particular term, 40.3% of all applicants ended up enrolling. For African-American students, it was 34%. And we're subtracting that overall rate from the group rate for minus 6.2. And that's where we're seeing this negative bar. Some of our bars, some of the other bars are positive because a higher percent of that particular group ended up enrolling in the college than the overall average. So this is a neat visual feature rather than having to calculate by hand. So you can look at this and then you can go back and look at everyone and you can do calculations, but that gets a bit cumbersome. And we can do this for any different group. It can be helpful to kind of more visualize the access gaps in enrollment this way, as opposed to needing to do that math yourself. One thing I'll point out is this scale will change based on the numbers. So it is important to kind of pay attention. In this case, this gap is minus 3.3. You might see much larger gaps elsewhere. And you kind of need to keep that in context as you're using these data. We'll spend some more time with percentage point gap on each of the following pages as well. So, Eric, I see that your screen is highlighted, but it might just be catching background noise.
Can you access further details of, say, ethnicity factors? Is there further categorization of the various categories that instructors can look at?
Mark, sorry, I had a hard time hearing that question. Was I the only one?
I'm sorry. I adjusted my microphone better, but if the instructor wants to go further into the details of the background of the applicants to sort out factors that might become are involved, is that possible?
Would you be able
like I know Asian Americans do better in my class, success rates or application rates like we're looking at right now. There's an equity gap. And I wanted to further probe factors that might be related, causing that, or is it possible to delve more deeply into the data?
So at this point, the tool kind of doesn't let us do a bit more of the double disaggregation, which I think it might be a method, for example, of trying to unpack a bit further. But I'm going to hand that over to Katie. 1 second.
go? Yeah.
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
the goal is actually in the long term to get another filter in there so you can slice by different variables. So you could like disaggregate by like ethnicity and gender or whatever. So that's the goal. And in fact, I had the goal this summer of adding something like that, but ultimately decided to add program awards into the dashboard. But that is on the list of things to do. But it's a good question.
Did that answer your question, Mark, or was there another piece to it?
Well, I just like there's some factors that play with all ethnicities that are adverse, and some that play with all ethnicities that are positive. You want to sort that out. Say like family background or something, or economic status. So we know that that plays out with how the students apply or how they succeed in courses. If an instructor wants to look at that and see how it's affecting the different groups, is that possible? And I guess the answer is no. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and Sabrina put in the chat, we can also, in the meantime, if the groups that are available here are not answering your question, and until double disaggregation is possible in this dashboard, you can always submit a research request and we can work with you on an individual basis. Brandon will talk more about that process at the end of the presentation. So that's a good question. Thank you, Mark. I'm going to go ahead and move into matriculation data. And you'll notice the page is very familiar, same format. So as you move through the data, this will become easier and easier to navigate because Paul's done a great job of setting this up in a familiar way. So for those of you who are really focused on matriculation data points, such as assessment, education plans, orientation, follow-up counseling appointments, these are all available here. By default, these 3 items are selected. You can look at any one of them individually, or you can look at them all together. And this is the percentage of students who complete whatever items that you have selected. We also have the option to include certain students who were exempt or were new transfer matriculated and or grandfathered. This will kind of change those numbers. So for those of you working with these data regularly, that option is available. And once again, you have the option to look at fall or spring or both, as well as the option to disaggregate the data by a variety of options. And again, to use the percentage point gap to visualize any disproportionate impact. And again, in this case, the percentage point gap is calculated by taking the group's percentage completion and subtracting the average completion for all students. And so here for these 3 items, we're seeing our students age 25 or older are experiencing about a 10% gap on these elements, especially in these earlier terms, a little bit less in the later terms. Moving on to enrollment. So now we're getting down to what students are experiencing while they're at CRC. The first thing I want to point out on the enrollment tab is the difference between these 2 lines, which can be a little bit confusing. So we have what's called duplicated enrollment and unduplicated enrollment. Unduplicated enrollment, this lower number, simply means the count of all the students who are enrolled at CRC. So each student here is counted 1 time. It's more of a count of students. This duplicated enrollment line represents all of the course enrollments that students have during that term. So as an example, if Brandon and I are taking classes right now, we both count as 1 student for the unduplicated count. If I'm taking 5 classes and Brandon's taking 1, I will be 5 enrollments and Brandon is 1 enrollment. So for fall 2021, we can look at this about 14,000 and about 32,000 on average. Students are taking about 2 classes in fall 2021. That's obviously that's not how it works. Some students are taking 7 and others are taking 1, but we can think of it as more the number of classes each student is taking. And this becomes important for programs, programs who are looking at student course taking patterns within their program. Sometimes your duplicated and unduplicated counts will be really, really close or the same. Sometimes they'll be different, meaning students are taking more than 1 class within your program. So that's kind of a differentiation that matters more to some programs than others, and we can always work with you if you have questions about it. So speaking of programs, the enrollment data page is very useful for disaggregating by an academic program. So we were first looking at the college-wide enrollment. I'm just picking programs completely at random in order to make up a program. This is my fictitious program to give a demonstration of how I might use these data within a program. So I see here Students are taking more than one course because the duplicated count is higher than our unduplicated count. And I'm kind of seeing enrollment peak in fall 2019 and come down a little bit after. And once again, we have the ability to disaggregate student access to our programs by those same demographic groups here. I kind of see a somewhat equal split between female and male students, less other and unknown gendered students. And once again, we can evaluate equity. And in this case, for enrollment specifically, we're looking at the enrollment of this group in our program compared to that group's representation college-wide, because we're looking at access to our program. So for example, in fall 2017, female students constituted 48.9% of my fictitious program and 54% of college-wide students, which is a difference of -5.5. So in this fictitious program, there seem to be female students are slightly underrepresented, around 5% or less compared to the college-wide enrollment. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, and also in that circumstance, if you're wondering why the subtraction worked out to 5.5 there, it's because of the college-wide rate is being rounded to 0 digits. We discovered that this week, so I'm going to fix that. But it is 5.5, I guarantee that. So once you come back in here, probably tomorrow morning, you'll see a decimal point after that number that makes that more clear.
Sorry, Paul. I didn't even notice as I said that out loud. Yeah, so this is access to a program. And again, you can, especially for those of you who have already undergone program review, you might be familiar with this process of kind of exploring the percentage point gap for different groups of students in your programs. And again, this is a completely fictitious program, or fictitious CAC, I should say, made up of various programs across campus. Okay, I'm going to move into course success data. And again, very similar pattern in the dashboard. We're looking at college-wide success rates hovering just below 70% across campus. Again, we can disaggregate this by whatever program you choose. For me, it's these random programs. And something that's cool here is you can compare to the college-wide right in the graph. So you don't have to toggle back and forth between the college. So for my selected program, I'm seeing a success rate that's slightly below the college average, and it seems to have, that difference seems to have grown in the more recent terms. That's interesting. I can look at fall and spring together, or just spring, or just fall, as articulated on the other screens. And then once again, we can conduct an equity analysis here. So first, I'm just looking at the success rates of my younger students and my older students over time. But I can ask for a percentage point gap. And in this case, it's taking the success rate for the group and subtracting the overall success rate in this program for all students. So we see somewhat of a gap, not super big. It's always below 4 points for younger students over time, but it is persistent. And this is in my fictitious program. Okay. And now for the most exciting part of the dashboard, because this is the first time that we've kind of previewed this. Paul alluded to this earlier. He worked really hard this summer implementing this page, and it's something that has been requested of us to view ends for each group.
So you have to go back, you have to turn off the equity calculation and you can see the N in there if you mouse over the bar.
So it's not the least cumbersome way to do it, but it is available, Amanda.
Did you want to walk through that just to show or highlight like the before and after the equity? Just highlight, scroll over the bars. So all of the ends are presented. It's a mouse over and it'll share with you the percentage and how it's calculated.
So here we've got the numerator and denominator for our 24 or younger students in spring 2022. And then if I evaluate equity, I can see their gap. So if say I was interested in this gap where it's the largest in spring 2021, I see there's a difference of 3.3. I can then navigate back to spring 2021 and check out how many successful enrollments there were. And I can compare it to my 25 and older students as well. Or if I wanted to look at all students in my program, I can do that here. So a little bit of clicking spring 2021, 61.5%, 1,000 enrollments. Of course, no problem. Thank you for the question. So Paul worked really hard this summer to get our program awards data in here, and this is super useful for those of you who've gone through program review. Our first screen, our orange line is showing our associate's degrees. Our blue line is showing our associate's degrees for transfer. And the yellow line is our certificates. And right now we're looking at a count of the number of students who earned each of those types of awards. I can change it to the number of awards. And this difference is important because students can earn more than one award. They can earn, for example, an ADT and several certificates below that ADT. And they might do that in 1 year, or they might do that across several years. So counting students and counting awards in this case are very different things. And for the purposes of program review and planning, you can select any given program here and look at your awards breakdown within your program. And similarly, you can select a demographic group, which is showing either the number of awards for that group or the number of students who earned any type of award within that group. And we talked a lot about looking at equity for this outcome for program awards. It can be really difficult because you have to define kind of, when we're looking at a demographic group, which students within that demographic group were eligible to receive an award, which is a really tricky process. So what Paula ended up making available is looking at the demographic trends among majors in the selected programs. And I just want to highlight that this is an imperfect comparison, but the most useful that we have at this moment in time. So what we're looking at here is for each of these race and ethnicity subgroups, we're looking at the percentage of majors in that group for each of these years. And we can then compare the percentage of award earners in that program for that year. And the reason this is not formatted in the PPG method that we're so used to using on the other screens is that it's just very hard to compare, to identify and create an accurate comparison. Paul, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I think it's easier. So if you think about the access dashboard, what we do is we take the percentage of that student population in the program, and we subtract for that the percentage of that student population college-wide. And the reason why that's interesting is because if it's below the representation college-wide, we kind of have an idea of what is like expected just by like random selection. Like if you were to randomly pull a bunch of students out of the college, you would get 50% female students, 50% male students. And so it gives you, so like any sort of stray from that overall representation in the program suggests, so well, maybe there's some sort of like access issue or difference in like how students are picking their programs, etc. And so when it comes to program awards, because all of these students probably started in different years or in different terms, and they're getting their awards, some of them are getting their award 2 years after they started at CRC. Some have spent 5 years, some have spent 3 years, some transferred over from ARC. So it's really hard to identify that comparison population to determine what is expectable. If I knew, 25% of the students in the original cohort were male, it would be easier to make that comparison in a more direct way. So that's why we don't quite go as far as calculating a percentage point gap in this circumstance. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, please ask more questions. It just doesn't feel quite as easy to do that comparison here as it does in other circumstances.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, so we can't necessarily expect a chemistry student to have received an award in English, for example. So identifying that population is the tricky part. But we wanted to make some kind of comparison available to programs. So using majors within a given year, the breakdown of students within a major, that felt like a somewhat useful comparison to provide. I'm going to ask if there are any remaining questions on the CRC Hawk Dash before Paul dives into our next tool, the CRC Hawk Track. Okay. And if you do think of something, we are available as well as Brandon's talking head on the welcome page.
Okay, so the next tool I'm going to demonstrate after Katie did that demonstration of the Hawk Dash is this thing that we called the Hawk Track, which is a newer tool at CRC. It's not new at this point, but it's a newer tool than the Hawk Dash. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And if you were to navigate to the Hawk Track, this is the very first page that you're going to see. And on this page, well, actually, before I even do anything else, if you forget the stuff that I tell you here today, or if you're a little overwhelmed, you can actually go to the Need Help tab. And once again, Brandon has made a really cool video about how to navigate the Hawk Track, so you can come back and look at that. And you can also email us. You can email and ask questions of any of us, and we'll happily answer them. So I'm going to go back to the Select a Cohort tab, which is the landing page for the Hawk Track. And on this page, what you're doing basically is picking a cohort that you might be interested in. And the reason why this is important is because students in cohorts need time to do things. So you might want to go back a few years if you want to see the completion rate of students, etc. I'm seeing I'm getting a chat here.
That's just me. I'm making cliff notes
okay.
about the Hawk Dash.
Thanks, Sabrina. Okay, and on this page, it's pretty simple. You can actually pick your cohort in the upper left-hand corner. And for today, I'm just going to focus on 2020, 2021. And you can see kind of in that middle panel at the top of the screen, the number of students included in that fall cohort in 2020, 2021. So these are students that are coming in fall 2020, and they're new at CRC. And what we do is, in addition to checking if they have the new flag on their record, we check back in the district to make sure that they haven't enrolled anywhere prior to the summer, except for as special admit students. So a lot of these students coming into this cohort tracker are new to college. So far as we know, they might have gone to another college, etc. It's really hard to find that information out in a clean way sometimes. So basically, these are new to college students coming into CRC, and you don't actually have to look at the full cohort of students. You can actually look at a cohort definition. So I've got in here, we can look at degree and transfer or certificate seeking. And if you actually pick that cohort, the cohort definition in the upper right-hand corner changes. So this is kind of an older definition of degree and certificate seeking. And so these are students who are first time new at CRC in the fall with no experience in the district prior to summer, aside from dual enrollment, who have completed at least 6 units at CRC and attempted math or English. That was a very old school, I think that was the scorecard definition of degree seeking students. And we can talk about the scorecard at another time, but it's an old dashboard that the CCCO used to maintain. Or we can do recent high school graduates, and this is something that we look at quite a bit. And these are students that report graduating high school in the spring prior to their fall enrollment at CRC. Okay, but I'm just going to focus on all students coming into CRC for this presentation here. And you can see that below the cohort selection, you can see a demographic breakdown of the students that come in. We've got race and ethnicity on the left. We've got a donut chart of gender in the middle. This might be one of the only circumstances where I would ever use a pie chart, but that's the one time that I got to do it. And then you have a breakdown of other demographic characteristics like age, or first generation, foster youth, reported disability, and veteran status as well. Okay, so you can get a sense of the demographics of the student population entering, but a lot of people are going to want to know about the journey of these students. And so in the tabs to the right of select a cohort, we have cohort enrollment and cohort achievements. And in the cohort enrollment tab, what you're going to look at is their enrollment behavior across, and we track them over basically 3 years, so 6 primary terms. So you're going to look at enrollment behavior across those 6 terms, assuming that the cohort actually has those 6 terms. Or you can look at cohort achievements, which is going to show you things like, did they complete certain unit milestones? Did they complete at CRC? Did they transfer? Did they earn an award, etc.? And so basically we're taking these students and we're tracking them forward. And I should say, actually, before I move on to these other tabs, if I go to the 2022-2023 cohort, this tool is really useful for student services who are trying to get students enrolled in enough units to graduate on time, etc., because this dashboard updates every single day. So from day 1 of the enrollment, you could actually come in here and see the size of our new student cohort grow as we near the fall term. So this dashboard is live, and it's live for all of the students in those first 3 years of their journey at CRC. So I'm going to go back to 2020, 2021, and then we're going to go into cohort enrollment. And what happens if you click into cohort enrollment or cohort achievements is the first thing you're going to see is a snapshot. And this particular cohort right now is enrolled in their 5th term at CRC. And you can see that this is the 2020-21 cohort in their 5th term. And we haven't filtered by any sort of special cohort definition. So this is all the new students coming in. And so you can see what their enrollment looks like right now in their 5th term at CRC. And another thing is, because this is live, like we're still a few days out from the start of the semester and certainly a couple of weeks out from census, you'll see this note that says data from the selected term is not finalized, because that will change as we get closer to census. And you can actually look back in time at this cohort. We can look at their 1st term or their 2nd term and so on and so forth. But these are really high level statistics. So one thing you might be interested in is looking at how this cohort compares to other cohorts, or how this cohort, how certain demographics groups do in this cohort relative to other demographic groups, etc. So what we can do here is click on conduct a comparison. And then it's going to prompt you to select a metric. So I'm going to do full-time enrollment. And actually, we're going to focus on the first term for these students. And so then you have a couple of options for comparisons. The first one says look at trends for this cohort. And actually, if I had the 5th term selected, you can actually see trends in full-time enrollment across the 5 terms for this particular cohort. I'm going to go back to first term. And let's say I'm interested in how this cohort compares in their first term and full-time enrollment to previous cohorts. I can click compare to previous cohorts. And you can see that how this particular cohort compares to other cohorts in their first term in full-time enrollment. And then here's another thing too, is that you can break this down by demographic groups. So if I wanted to look at age, I could break this down by age, and this is the percentage of students enrolled full-time by age group, and you can actually mouse over these bars to get sample sizes, etc. And actually, unlike the Hawk Dash, since this was designed a little bit later, this one does have a feature of being able to do additional filtering. So let's say that I wanted to focus on I don't know, I guess we could focus on gender in this case. So now I'm selecting, now we're looking at students that are all female, comparing younger female students to older female students. Or I could select male and I could look at the same disaggregation as well. You can actually double disaggregate this and filter it down to a particular group. Some people find this useful because we track certain cohorts in here as well. So they look at Elk Grove students, they want to know how Elk Grove students are doing, broken down by different demographic groups. Okay, and if you just do a breakdown by single demographic groups, you can actually calculate a percentage point gap as Katie demonstrated in the Hawk Dash. And so what we do is we take the rate for that particular group and subtract the overall rate within that cohort. So you can see here that 24 and younger students are actually 3.4 points above the overall cohort rates. Their group rate is 48.2 minus 44.8. Okay, so there's a lot of data to explore in here. There's lots of different metrics that we can look at: enrolling in transfer level English, enrolling in 15 units. You can look at how many students are actually enrolled. In the first term, that doesn't make much sense because 100% of them were enrolled. That's how we identify them as new students. You can look at average units withdrawn, etc. And the cohort achievement tab is actually not much different than the cohort enrollment tab. We can actually look at, I'm going to pick a different cohort because I want 3 years of data. So I'm going to go back. That's still a little bit too, we don't have the completion data yet for that cohort. So I'm going to go with cohort achievements for 2018-2019 student cohort. And the first thing you're going to see is a snapshot of the milestones that these students have achieved by the end of their 3rd year. So for example, you can see that like 52.5% of them completed transfer level English, 54% completed 15 transfer units, and we have 20.9% of them completed either completed 60 transferable units, completed a degree, or transferred to another institution. And you might be wondering why there's a lower percentage of students that have completed 60 units of transferable credit at CRC, and that's because a lot of them complete units at other colleges as well. So we only focus on the performance metrics that we calculate at CRC. And you can basically go through, and it's the same type of interface as the cohort enrollment tab, so we can conduct comparisons. I can click on completion, and I can compare this to previous cohorts to see where we're at with this cohort. And we can break that down by demographic groups. Or filter by demographic groups as well. And so that's the CRC Hawk track. Does anybody have any questions about that? Concerns, comments, suggestions?
One thing probably we want to also share is the only, I think, academic feature somewhat close to what we offer in Hawkdash is the CAC grouping. So we added a breakdown results by group, and that's the CAC. And I forget, Paul, if you can clarify the definition, but I think it's the major that they picked and that we have at the beginning of the term or the profile when we start, knowing that it's really hard. Sorry, I'm also with children here. I will in a second, honey. That it's measured by their major. The major then gets grouped into a career and academic community for us to then provide you these results in this way. But unlike the Hawkdash, we can't break it down by discipline specifically.
Yeah, exactly. So this is based off of their first term major. It's imperfect because you want to have maybe more requirements for when a student enters a program, but this was our first attempt at this. Any other questions? All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Brandon, and he's going to show you some other tools and some other ways of getting data that were not included in the dashboards we demonstrated here today.
All right, thanks, Paul. I will share, let's see. This one. So I'm back at the research office's data dashboard webpage. So if you go back to research, we have our data dashboards, and you'll see the links to the Hawkdash and the Hawk track. But there's one more local dashboard that we have, which is the faculty student success dashboard. So for the faculty in the room, you might be curious about, as you poke around Hawkdash and Hawk track, you might be thinking, oh, I kind of wonder how are my students doing as an individual. So this link here is actually behind the login. So if you click on it, you'll be taken to a login. I think I hit my login stuff, and you'll see a table of contents essentially of your different aspects of your personal data. So obviously I'm logged in with my personal data, so I won't be clicking around, but just letting you know, you have your summary data, which is sort of high level, all of the classes you've taught, counts and success rates. You have enrollment and course success and course withdrawal equity, and all of these do disaggregate by race, ethnicity, and other demographic variables, and you can calculate, right? You'll see visuals of your equity gaps. To help with this, let me pull up the chat here. I have taken a PD activity that we did last year, and I took Paul's a video of Paul talking about all these things, edited them together to a playlist. So there's a playlist in the chat of sort of the walkthrough of each element of the individual dashboard. So but yeah, so this is easy to find. It's in our research office website. And that one, again, right, it's personal, it's behind the login. The next one I just wanted to mention is that the district has also made some Power BI dashboards as well, and that's the Los Rios Community College Institutional Research link here. I think if you click on it, what's a little funky about this one is before it used to be that you can only access it from a district computer or behind the VPN, the Global Protect VPN. I don't think that's the case anymore, although I'm on VPN right now, so I
I
can see
think
it
it
all
it
over.
still applies for some of the Power BI. So basically, if you click on one of the buttons and it doesn't load, and you get basically an error message, you may want to try logging in, or it may ask you to sign in to their web portal with your Los Rios credentials. So basically, in short, as a opposite of the Hawk Dash and Hawk Track, while these are available, the tools from Los Rios are that are on Power BI, which is the dashboards that we're showing you, those are open to all employees. And then the team also offers public versions of reports that don't require you to access, but the ones that we're going through, you'll either be prompted to log in or it may not load. And so if you ever run into that error, it's probably best to remote in or try to access it from on campus.
Yeah, thanks, Serena. Yeah, so this one, in fact, as I clicked on the dashboard, it asked me to log in, and you can see it's a little sluggish, but now you're looking at district-wide data, and so it's very high-level stuff. Lots of clicking around to look at different breakdowns and whatnot. I will say that sometimes, like, you'll see, like, for example, like here's like fall 2017 CRC's enrollment count is 14,389. There's a chance that it might be off by a little bit from what you see in Hawk Dash, because there's some stuff that sometimes gets lost in translation. I don't think it's a significant amount, right, Paul? It's just like sometimes there's just little things that may get counted.
Yeah, in terms of enrollment, the district has a slightly different method. So sometimes there's like a couple of students that are in labs with blank grades that get counted in that number. And then the Hawk Dash, those get filtered out.
Right. And then also, I think because our district research office is also responsible for all of our MAS in concert with district IT, there's a heavy load of reporting data kind of to the way in which they have to demonstrate kind of this consistency with MIS and iPads. And so we're just trying to be transparent that their numbers may differ slightly from what we have, and they'll typically mimic what's on the chancellor's office district system-wide data tools when it comes to enrollment counts.
So yeah, so that's kind of the high level thing. There's a long list of dashboards you can pick from and play with. We obviously don't have time to go through all of them or anything like that, but the other component, and then the other couple of components down here on we have links to the Chancellor's Office, student success metrics and Data Mart if you want to get into pretty high level examples. Like on Data Mart, you can pull larger pieces of data from the state level, which would go down to like other colleges, right? You can look at not course specific, not course level, but like college level. Sometimes you can look at by the curriculum. I don't want to say department level, but by groupings in the curriculum, there's top codes and whatnot. So you can kind of look at some stuff there as well. But yeah, that's like kind of that's it for like the high level dashboards that we have. The other piece that I wanted to talk about, I think next, is the research data request form. So let's suppose you're going through these dashboards. I've gone through my student success dashboard, and I've thought about some different things about the equity gaps that I saw, and maybe I have some other questions that I want to dig a little deeper into. That's where our research data request form is over here on the side. And here you can type in your contact information, and eventually, after you hit next, you can kind of describe what sort of data you're looking for, what sort of time frame you're looking at, in terms of when you want the data snapshotted. And as well, there's a turnaround time of 15 business days. So, we have that sort of constraint as well. Oh, Sabrina's got a hand up, sorry.
I just wanted to add a few things. What's really important to note that the 15 days are typically within kind of if they fall in line with like our research agenda per se. Obviously, the ones that are more strict to the federal or mandated state reporting, we try to prioritize accordingly. But basically, we prioritize the requests based on their alignment with our research agenda. And I say that because sometimes we have some very broad research questions that typically take a few meetings to kind of identify like, okay, this is what you really want to know. And part of that interaction that we support also allows us to manage expectations. You may have a research question that asks about your colleagues' department's course success rate in a specific course. And one of the things we do not do is share course level data at this point. So we don't compare, for example, like art history 300 to journalism 310 or whatever. We just don't do those course to course comparisons. Now you can see your own data under the student success dashboard for the courses you have taught. And those data get, you can compare that to college-wide, but we're still part of this relationship with data on campus is we also want to make sure folks feel that this is being used in a way that's supportive for continuous improvement. And that's exactly why we have your success data logged in and kept private for your specific classes. But in general, one of the things we're trying to do is make sure folks feel that this data helps them identify where can they make improvements to help improve student success, and also close equity gaps. And so under that scope and in support of that mission of our college, that's how we try to interact. And so not always will we be able to give you everything you request, but we'll do our best to work with you to find out what we can share with you to help you kind of find the information you're looking for or identify resources that'll help you get to those data that you're looking for. So.
Yep. Thank you, Sabrina. So yeah, like that's kind of everything in a nutshell at the high level, right? You have dashboards leading all the way up through district and the state. You have our local dashboards. You have our research request form and the context kind of behind that. Are there any questions? Yeah, I had the short part.
I can talk if you want to go back a bit to the data dashboards and resources, Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll mention two things. On the resource request form, we got asked, does my dean have to know? And the reason why we also ensure your dean's involved is or supervisor, it's so that this resource of our office is being requested amongst our employees and staff, and we we try to keep things in alignment and in support of and collaborative with pretty much everyone. It shouldn't be a secret what's being worked on. And then also with the data tools in general, or actually before I go to the data tools, in going back to the research request form, the 15 days. Again, we'll let you know. I know that seems like a long time, but we're also, so in addition to the ad hoc requests we get to support a lot of our outreach and efforts to help improve student enrollment, for example, or to meet a reporting requirement for some of our federal grants or some of our state grants. We're also managing multiple longitudinal projects that take more than a day or two to complete. And so it's a juggling of a full plate of research activities and projects. And so the 15 days kind of allows us to plan accordingly and to, meet the needs of the campus to the degree that we can. And sometimes I guess I'm saying all of that to the short end of sometimes it could take longer than 15, but we'll be in communication with you should that be a problem or should we have to extend the turnaround. And that's the main point is that, you will receive communication. We will reach out to you if we're not sure, and we'll do our best to meet your needs within the capacity of our office. So I hope that makes sense. And then going back to the data tools, as Brandon mentioned with the public statewide system tools, the student success metrics are very closely aligned to some of the statewide kind of regs and plans that we have in place. For example, vision for success goals and student equity plans and the student-centered funding formula. And so if you really were curious, you can kind of navigate and explore those data elements. You can also navigate to the chancellor's office to kind of have a better understanding under those three regulated areas of the student-centered funding formula under the fiscal and facilities finance office division. I'm trying to remember what their proper name is at the chancellor's office, but I think it's under finance. The student equity plan is under a different area, but all of those you can navigate. All of them are heavily documented. If you're ever curious, but that's a plug because we will be bringing to the college our student equity plan for 2022 to 2025, and we will likely be recalibrating our goals, vision for success goals, now that we with the data based on what's available from the chancellor's office. All of the metrics that you see, whether it's a chancellor's office data mart, the student success metrics, or vision for success goals, etc. All of them are dependent upon the MIS data that I mentioned to you before. MIS stands for Management Information System. It's basically our standardized statewide reporting system that we use to report all data from who we employ to financial aid, to the course attributes, to everything you can see here on the screen to the chancellor's office in a standard format across 116 colleges. And so it's actually, if you're ever curious, and a great resource if you were ever trying to do a statewide system study on a particular outcome with the data that you have at hand that's publicly available. So you have basically a wealth of data tools, both locally, district-wide, and statewide when it comes to student success and enrollment. And that's the main point I wanted to share.
Cool. Thank you, Sabrina.
I know that's a lot, but I appreciate everyone's patience with kind of my long-winded feel of trying to walk through all of that. But we do want to emphasize there's a ton of information out there. And part of our, if you were to request data, that would be part of our interaction. What else can we answer? Where else can we look? And we're happy to go to your CAC or your department and go over some of the data that's available and narrow it down specifically to your area or your discipline, and engage more intimately about kind of what those data are for your area and kind of help unpack that a bit more kind of at the pace of your group, if that makes sense.
Cool.
I know we covered a lot. Are there any questions from Todd, Eric, Kiali, Amanda, Min, Maliana, Liliana, Mark? I'm all calling everyone's name. We know we covered a lot, and thanks to the team for doing those demos. No more questions. Thanks, Min. Thanks, Amanda. Thank you, Liliana. All right, well, maybe just I'll drop our email in case you have questions. It's crc-research, easy, at crc.losrios.edu. You can use the data request form or you can reach out to us. And like I said, we're available to come visit you in your department if you want to talk more data. Thanks for everything. And thanks for showing up to our Flex workshop, and have a great rest of your Flex week.